Hello, fellow writers, and welcome to our discussion about organizing an argument. We're not talking about organizing a cable TV shouting match or a presidential debate here. We're talking about organizing a written argument in an academic writing situation. Most academic writing situations are involved with presenting a thesis that you intend to offer evidence to the reader in order to persuade the reader of the correctness of that proposition, that thesis. Okay, so there's a lot of argument that you're going to have to be doing in a very pleasant way, I should add, in academic writing. And we're going to look at this Purdue Online Writing Lab worksheet to kind of walk us through some of the steps that are effective in thinking about and organizing an effective argument in your academic writing. So the first question presented is, how can I effectively present my argument? And the answer to that is right below here. It says using an organizational structure to arrange the argument will make sense to the reader. How will it make sense to the reader? You can use a structure, and there are methods out there of how to do that. One of them that's most common and easy to use is called the Toulmin Method. And the Toulman Method is a formula for organizing an argument. Here are the basic elements of the Toulman Method. The first one is your claim. That's your overall thesis, your thesis statement. What is the claim you are making and the point you will argue for? The second part of this structure is data. Evidence gathered to support the claim, data broadly stated. What evidence can you bring to bear on your thesis statement that will be persuasive to your reader in convincing her or him that you are correct in the proposition you are asking them to believe? A warrant, also referred to as a bridge, is something else. That is an explanation of why or how the data supports the claim. I'm going to go through some of these in more detail in just a minute. But the warrant is another part of the Toulman Method, referred to as a bridge, for reasons we'll talk about in a minute. It's the explanation of why or how this data, the evidence that you support, that you bring to bear to support your claim, works. Why is it important? Why is it valid? Let's scroll down a little bit. The backing is also referred to as the foundation, is additional logic or reasoning that may be necessary to support the warrant. So when you get into the warrant, the explanation of why or how the data supports what your claim is, sometimes you need to reason that out. You need to persuade through logic that this actually does work to support your claim. And counterclaims are very important and an often ignored part of arguing that is very important, because a counterclaim is something that negates or disagrees with the thesis that you are trying to put forward and provide evidence for. So the counterclaim is something that is important because you need to address that. You cannot just leave it out there for someone to bring up in your writing and still have an effective argument without addressing that claim and going to the next point, rebutting it, the rebuttal. Evidence that negates or disagrees with the counterclaim. Okay, so here's some copy down below that says including a well thought out warrant or bridge is essential to writing good argumentative essay or paper. If you present data to your audience without explaining how it supports your thesis, they won't make the connection between the two and they may draw different conclusions. Okay, so it's kind of putting in a little commercial for making sure you think about the warrant here. Okay? And don't avoid that opposing argument, that counterclaim. You need to include the opposing side as a counterclaim. Find out what the other side is saying, respond to it. Otherwise, your audience could be swayed by a weak and yet unrefuted argument. So you need to take that into account. You need to address it. Okay, let's go to some examples that will show us how these parts are actually formulated of this Toulman method. Again, we're going to scroll down. Okay, let's talk about the claim a little more effectively. Here's an example of a claim or a thesis statement. hybrid cars are an effective strategy to fight pollution. Okay. One of the things we learn in talking about a thesis statement is that it must be debatable. It must be something that reasonable people could disagree on. So this is stated in that way. That's our claim. Okay, so we're going to run through this method in relation to considering this idea that hybrid cars are an effective strategy to fight pollution. Here's a data point. Here's some data that we can bring to bear on it. Driving a private car is a typical citizen's most air-polluting activity. Okay, so we're saying a statement of fact that we are offering for consideration is that driving a private car is the way most of us contribute to air pollution. It's an activity we all engage in. Now, our warrant needs to tell us why that piece of data supports our claim. Why does that support the claim that hybrid cars are an effective strategy to fight pollution? Because it says cars are the largest source of private as opposed to industry-produced air pollution. Switching to hybrid cars should have an impact on fighting pollution. Okay, so we've linked our data point, our data 1 item here, with our claim and explained why the data supports the claim. Now, data 2 is another point here that says each vehicle produced is going to stay on the road for roughly 12 to 15 years. Okay, so we're making another point that talks about hybrid cars as an effective strategy. And our data point is just laid out there. Average vehicle is going to stay on the road for about 12 to 15 years. How does that link to our claim? Well, Warrant 2 explains that. Cars generally have a long lifespan, meaning that a decision to switch to a hybrid car will make a long-term impact on pollution levels. So they're saying if you're going to have a car out there for 12 to 15 years, a hybrid car is going to be better to have out there than a current polluting type of automobile. Okay, so our warrant, again, is showing how data point 2 supports the claim. So here's another data item. Hybrid cars combine a gasoline engine with a battery-powered electric motor. Okay, so there is a contention, a statement. How does that relate to our claim? Warrant 3 explains that. This combination of technologies, i.e. gasoline engine and battery-powered electric motor, means that less pollution is produced. According to indeedtoknow.org, and we're citing a source here, some of the research we've done, quote, the hybrid engine of the Prius made by Toyota produces 90% fewer harmful emissions than a comparable gasoline engine, end quote. So our warrant is supported with a source here. And that supports the hybrid car's battery-powered electric motor gasoline engine combination that supports our claim that hybrid cars are an effective way to fight pollution. Okay, now let's talk about the counterclaim. Okay, the counterclaim is something that argues against your contention, your thesis. We've got to address that to be credible. So here's the counterclaim. Instead of focusing on cars, which still encourages a culture of driving even if it cuts down on pollution, the nation should focus on building and encouraging use of mass transit systems. So this is a claim that might be used to say your claim that hybrid cars are an effective way to fight pollution is not valid, because instead of focusing on cars, we should focus on the culture of driving. The nation should, not the culture of driving, we should focus on building and encouraging the use of mass transit systems. In other words, alter the culture. That would solve the problem better than coming up with a lot of hybrid cars all of a sudden. Less driving. Okay, why is that not a good claim to counter your claim about hybrid cars? So here is your rebuttal. While mass transit is an environmentally sound idea that should be encouraged, it is not feasible in many rural and suburban areas or for people who must commute to work. Thus, hybrid cars are a better solution for much of the nation's population. So there you've gone through your system of establishing a claim, providing data, a warrant that tells why that particular piece of data or information is valid and supports your claim. We've done that in 3 examples here. And then we've come to the counterclaim saying some people might argue that it's phony, a solution that is not valid to focus on hybrid cars when we should be focusing on the culture of driving. Getting more people to use mass transit would be a better way to devote our resources and energies than developing hybrid cars. So you would pose that in your argument to say, this is one claim that has been made counter to my claim. You wouldn't state it that way, but it is the effect of how you would bring it into your argument. And then you rebut that just by saying, well, it's a good idea, and it should be just encouraged, but it just doesn't work for very many areas, suburban areas, rural areas, and people have to commute. Hybrid cars are a better solution for much of the nation's population. So that's how you would organize an argument using the Toulmin method.